Okay, I think we are live. Hello, everybody. This is Gretchen Wegner, and welcome to our very first guest expert in the anti-boring approach to powerful studying summer learning extravaganza that we have going on. I am so delighted that some of you are here live and others of you are watching our recording. And there are yet others, I think, who are guests to us who Julie has invited to be with us. So welcome, everybody. I am just so delighted to introduce Julie Smith to everybody. And Julie, we met maybe 2 years ago?
I think it's been 2 years ago. We met on an online program and just and instantly we hit it off. And I think part of it is we're both still kids at heart.
Yes. We're kids at heart, and we enjoy bringing that sense of playfulness into our work, both with kids and with parents. So
Absolutely.
I'm so delighted that finally we get an opportunity to do something together.
I am too. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I just wanted to name that I'm normally in Oakland, California, although I come to you from Minnesota right now. And Julie, tell us where you are.
Well, I am in Boulder, Colorado, and I have to preface this, and I know I mentioned it to you, since this is an anti-boring series, I'm actually working out of my house today, so my cats might join us and walk right across this screen, so I just wanted to share that. But yes, I am in very colorful Colorado, and I know you and I have had some fun playing with time changes, going from Pacific to Central to Mountain, but figured it out.
Yes. So in just a moment, I'm going to have Julie tell us all about herself and why she's here with us today. But first, I just want to let viewers know that my assistant Megan is here with us again. And Megan, if you could just say hi to everybody in the chat, that would be great. The chat is on the right side of the screen. I'm hoping that everyone coming in can see it. But Megan will be helping with that. If for some reason you're having trouble getting into that, you can email me at gretchen.wegner@gmail.com or, yeah, just email me because I don't know Megan's email off the top of my head. So I think, oh, I know, actually, hold on just a second. I'm not seeing there. I've enabled the chat box. Good. We're in. Yay. Okay. So, Julie, what brings you to this place in your life where you have become the flip side of parenting?
Well, so several years ago, well, let me step back. I've always worked with kids. I've loved it. Even when I was a teenager myself, I was a peer mentor. I worked with kids. I loved it, and I worked with my peers, and that's carried on my whole life. And several years ago, I was working on a program, Character Clubs, where I worked with kids ages 4 to 9 on developing a sense of the habits of character, gratitude, responsibility, integrity, service, and synergy. And I loved doing it. But the one question that kept coming up is, well, this is great for my kids now, but what about when they get older? Or my child's having this going on, and I don't know what to do. And it really prompted me to go back and take a look at where my passions were. And I realized how much I love working with kind of that tween to teen stage, ages kids, they're 10 to 15, and just immersed myself into their world and all the, what I call the art, science, and adventure around them. And so I've created an approach, as you mentioned, the flip side of parenting. So I have that, and then I also have my private practice, and I'm working with kids and their parents every day, which I love.
And are you mostly working one-on-one in sort of a therapeutic situation or in family groups, or just say a little bit about the format?
I do both. So I am an adolescent counselor, and I work with individuals. I work with adolescents one-on-one, and it could be on any topic, from garden variety issues that come up, whether it's, excuse me, social skills, homework, which is great, which is some of the things we've talked about, to a little more intense things that are coming up: social anxiety, generalized anxiety, depression. So I have the one-on-one practice working with that. But a large part of what I do is work with parents on just getting to understand tweens to teens so they can help their child understand themselves.
Yeah. And I love, that's one reason I'm so excited to be partnering with you, because in my work as an academic life coach for teens, I see how much support parents need, and I can provide a little of it from my own area of expertise around education, but there are so many holes that I can't really address. So I'm thrilled to have you with us today to start addressing some of those. To viewers, I also want to mention, if questions come up as you go, please feel free to type them into the chat. Megan is going to be tracking the questions, and then at the end, we will be able to, I will read some of those questions to Julie once I've gone through all of my questions for her. And as I think I said before, Megan's also, I see there's one little technical issue happening, so Megan will be trying to help you with that, Allison. Okay, so I think we should just get started with you telling us, Julie, what the flip side of parenting is.
Right, we both mentioned it, and the flip side of parenting is really just a parenting approach, because in any relationship, it has to be reciprocal. You cannot have a one-sided relationship. So the flip side is the parent coming in with their ideas, their perspectives, but also flipping it over and taking a look at what's going on with the child, asking them, getting their input, because the child's going to know best on what they need, and so we can't make those assumptions. So the flip side of parenting is really just this two-sided relationship, which is what it should be, of the parent and the child, and really listening to the feedback that they're giving you.
Great, great. So it's really, it sounds like it's really just about the listening process. Like that's one of the key areas where you see parents could use some more practice and support.
Well, and we're all there, and I admit, I mean, not only do I work with this, I live it. I have 3 kids of my own, and they're 10 and a half, 12 and a half, and almost 14. So I'm in the thick of it, so I get it. And often as a parent, we think, well, I know what's best for my child. And in many cases, we do know what's best, and we're here to guide them. But we get so wrapped up in, well, I know it best. I'm the grown-up. I'm this. I'm that we forget, oh, let's see what's working for them, because I'm coming in with just my experience. What's their experience? And so it's taking that step back and asking and listening, and not just thinking that we're always right. Really, like you said, listening and taking action on their comments and their feedback, including them in the parenting process. It's a family.
Yeah. And I think that I'm realizing I'm not a parent, but there's a lot I can take away from this too, in terms of my listening when I am in sessions with students. And I feel like I do a pretty good job of that, because I know that's part of my work, but there are always moments where my emotions and my desire for them to act a certain way is stronger in the moment than my listening skills. So I'm excited. I didn't realize I would be taking away some personal tips as well, so thank you.
Well, and it's tough because we all have our own agenda, whether we realize it or not. And as a coach or a counselor, we're trained to put that aside, but it's difficult because it still creeps in, and especially as parents, because we are so passionate about our kids, and it definitely kind of presides over it, where we're like, but I know what's best, I this. So yeah, you really have to take that step back.
What's the most common question you get from parents about parenting tween to teens?
Well, one of the first things I get is, sometimes I get, oh, it's not even a question, it's a statement. Oh, that's a whole new thing. But the question I get is, I don't get what happened. They were just so sweet, and where'd they go? I just don't understand them. And after I nod my head in agreement, because I've been there and I'm there, I always, I think the thing is, this is the tween. This is, welcome to your new child. This is developmentally where they need to be in terms of separating and eye rolling and challenging you some. They're not who they were. They've got so many things going on to them, and I even jotted down a few things so I wouldn't forget that. Like they need just their physiological changes. They're going through puberty, so their whole brain chemistry changes. They've got the body changes, self-image. They have an increased need for autonomy. They want more privacy. And they've got a greater investment in their friends. All those things are going on. So it's not the sweet little child you remember. somebody, there's still elements, but it's a different person. But I think one of the biggest challenges is you've got your child going through all this. They're separating, which they're supposed to, is that we're going through changes as well. So we're all of a sudden we're faced with, oh my God, I don't have a little child anymore. I have a teenager. Am I old? Am I this? And that's what I hear is, well, if I have a teenager or a teenager, I must be getting old. And it strikes this fear of, oh, they're getting older, I'm getting older, things are out of control. So parents are viewing this as, I have to control the situation. And where the child's saying, I just need some space, leave me alone. And so you get these situations of, well, my child argues with me, my child does this. And that will happen, but that's not always the case. So we have to really take a look at what's going on and then look and say, okay, this is a new stage for them, for me, what can I do?
I really am compelled by your pointing out that parents are going through a new developmental phase too, and that there is this automatic desire, or desire may even be the stronger, not strong, like it's a knee-jerk reaction to just like, oh, things are different. I need to work harder to control things. Life is more dangerous for my child now as they are going through some of these changes, and oh God, I need to control it. Whereas the teenager or teenager needs perhaps the opposite of a parent who is going into controlling drive.
Changing to the benchmark. So when we have infants, there's a benchmark. Okay, this is the norm. This is what happens. If something falls below it, we're like, oh, okay, we have to step in. If something falls or is above it, we're like, oh, okay, I need to take a look. And the same when they're toddlers or in elementary school. It's no different when they're tweens or teens. There just has to be a new benchmark of what is acceptable, what's normal. And it's not always going to be quantity of conversations and connections. You're looking for the quality. Because even at the best, you're going to have limited talks with your kids. It's just the way it's supposed to be, because they're supposed to move out. They're supposed to start relying on their peers. And it is so difficult. And I go through this, and that's why I always say, I don't just say this and not feel it. I have had moments where I've cried thinking, but they don't want to talk to me. And I still go through this. And then I have to remember, this is what it's supposed to be. This is who they're supposed to be. And how do we find those ways to have some quality connections?
Beautiful. Well, and speaking of quality connections, I think you've got a bunch of do's and don'ts for us around communication.
I do, and I don't, but yes, I do. So I'm going to start with the don'ts first, because there's actually just a few. There's lots of do's, but the don'ts are the ones that always come in. And the biggest one is don't nag, don't lecture, don't put them on guilt trips. Those, and I've done it too. In fact, I will say I just did it the other day, and I caught myself. And so if you are doing that, catch yourself and say, oh my gosh, I'm lecturing you. That must be awful. Because think about it, we don't like to be talked to that way. And so it's putting yourself, again, flipping it over, putting yourself in your child's shoes. Talk to your child the way you want to be talked to. And if you're not sure, ask them, does this sound like a lecture? What's the best way, for us to talk about this? Just ask the question. Would
you be willing to, sorry to interrupt, but I'm so curious to hear, I don't want you to give away anything your child wouldn't want us hearing, but is there a way that you can tell us a little bit about the scenario where you caught yourself? Yeah,
absolutely. And it's funny you mention that, because what the next don't is, don't share your children's confidences. However, I love that you asked that. I always ask my kids. And that is the one thing, because I'm so open about our life, I have to ask them, and I'll say, is it okay I post this? Is it okay I share this? So yes, I can give you that example. For my son, he and my daughter, they're 12 and 13. They're back to back in grades for my two older ones, and arguing all the time. And I found myself saying, don't treat her like this. You know how you do it. And it just kind of came off very controlling. And there was how would you like it if she did this to you? And you could still have the same message, but it was how I was saying it. What are you going to do when she's not around there anymore, or something happens? And I could just see him going deflating. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm sorry. I said, you know what? I'm really upset. I'm angry. I have to step back, because right now, anything I say is just going to come across bad for you and for me. And I had to step back from it. And it's the same with nagging. I do that. Ugh, really? There's more clothes? Can you just pick up your clothes? And I have to step back and say, you know what? We have a chore list. You guys need to take care of this. And really look at how I'm talking.
Mm.
And same with school. With schoolwork, it comes up, and you've probably seen this where kids are like, if I hear my mom tell me one more time how important schoolwork is, I'm going to, my head's going to blow up or whatever. So we really have to look at ways for us to step back instead of lecturing and give them the tools to figure it out themselves.
I got a text message during final exams from a client of mine who is a senior in high school. And the text message said, could you just please tell my mom that nagging me and telling me how important grades are is not going to help me right now? And I loved that she could do that.
And that's what they need to have, the voice, because they know it's important. He knows he shouldn't be fighting with his sister. He knows, they know that they need to do schoolwork. Us telling it doesn't make them know it anymore. What we have to give them is the ability to make the choice that, yes, this is important. What does that look like? And so it's kind of stepping back and giving them some tips, some suggestions, and as hard as it is, also zipping our own lip. And that's hard because, we feel that we know best.
So how do we do that? I imagine that's part of your do's list. How do we step back without saying too much, but we have to say just enough to help them make the choice they need to make. So what do we do, Julie?
Well, there's actually quite a few things you can do. And I think the first thing is approach this relationship, because again, this is a new stage in your relationship. Approach it as this is somebody you're getting to know. I don't know if this happens to you, but I've experienced this many times. When you first meet somebody, you're so interested in finding out who they are, or what they do, and really getting to know them. We have to treat our tween-teen the same way. Who are they? How do we get to know them? Ask these questions. Not prying, not nagging, not being the authoritarian, just getting to know who they are. So that's the biggest thing, is to come into this relationship as, oh, I'm curious. So bringing curiosity. Curiosity and connection go hand in hand. The more you're curious, rather than suspicious, but curious, the more you're going to have these pockets of connection. You've also got to, I always say know yourself, and we've just talked about that. Make sure it's not your agenda coming in. So look at where you're at. What is the point? Make sure we're not living vicariously through them. Are we, again, having our own agenda? Are we talking to them about, oh, you should do this, you should do that? And I always tell people, don't should on yourself. And I'm going to say that again later, because the more we say should, the more is guilt. So it brings up those guilt trips. You've got, be a good listener. Respect their privacy. That's a big one. Giving your child privacy. When they come home from school, the last thing they want to do is talk. A great example is yesterday. Two of my kids are in a summer program, and I said, why don't you guys walk back from the bus, and I'll just see you here. They had 10, 15 minutes, their own thoughts. They were on their own. They came home. I gave them a few minutes. They just went to their rooms. It wasn't 10 minutes later, they came up and they were telling me about popsicles and the leadership program and this and that. And it was actually very overwhelming for me. I got to this point where I was like, wait a minute, this is too much information. But if you give them that space, they will come to you and tell you. You just have to learn to be patient and respect that need for privacy. Ask open-ended questions. If you ask, did you like this? Yes. No. That's all you're going to get. Tell me about this. You're going to get a lot more. Keep it
You know what? On the theme of open-ended questions, I've noticed that as a coach, most successful question with kids, and I'm going to say what it is in a second, but the question I want to ask you about that is this question just good because I'm a coach, or is this a good thing that parents could ask as well? I get the typical, like, how was your day? Oh, fine.
Fine. Yeah.
Nothing more. Nothing. And then I say, or what'd you do? Nothing. Or stuff. And I say, great, if I had a movie camera and it was following you through your day, what would I see on my end of the camera?
I love that question. That's a fantastic question to ask. because it has them explain certain things. And you're not going to hear all of it, but you're going to hear the things that they remember about their day. So I love questions like that. If, I always say, if I were a chapter in a book, what would today be that, what would the chapter be about your day? So those type of questions are really great. Instead of saying, how's your day? And I'm going to talk about this in a minute. Have them grade their day. Oh, this is an F. And that's, okay. Okay, I'm going to take a few steps back and later provide this opportunity to talk. But I'm not going to really go into it right now unless you want to say, well, do you want to talk about what made it an F? No, not right now. Okay, let's set aside some time later. So those type of things you can do. It makes it a little more open-ended. But I love the movie camera as they relate to video. If I was a YouTube channel, if I was a blogger, what would I blog about of your day? Or what would you blog about? So those speak their language.
It makes me curious, those of you who are listening, I know we have a little bit of a lag, so I'm going to ask this question for you to chat, and then Julie and I are going to move on with our conversation. But I'd be really curious to hear, either do you have a favorite open-ended question that seems to work with your kiddos, no matter how old they are? I know we have one parent with us who's the parent of older teens and college students, so I'd be really curious. And also, are there any of these communication do's or don'ts that you've heard so far that strike you as being especially helpful for you to remember? If you could just comment in the chat, that'd be fabulous. And of course, if you have questions, comment with that too. Are there any more on our list of do's and don'ts before we move on to our next topic?
There's so many that you can come up with, but I think the last two that I want to remind parents are respecting the autonomy, giving your child more chances to make decisions, to do things on their own. Again, they're growing up. Their job is to separate from us as a parent as much as we don't want them to. However, they've got to have those opportunities. So respecting that, and also remembering this should be fun. Yes, there's times where it's not fun, but you bring that sense of play back in. Doesn't mean that you have to play Barbies or Transformers unless your kid's into that, but sing, dance, play a video game, toss a frisbee, I don't know, do goofy things, make faces. Bring that sense of play back into the relationship. And yes, your child will roll their eyes at you. And yes, they will think, oh, Mom is being so weird. You do it anyway, because they're still going to walk away thinking that was kind of cool. So those are kind of the biggest, I think, do's, and there's so many more. The more you get into, like, oh, this worked. You're going to create your own list of, this worked for my child. I'm going to remember that.
Just wanted to check in on the chat. Taryn is saying, we do best and worst. What was the best part of your day and why?
I love that too. And what are you most grateful for today? That's another good one. What would you change if you could? That's another one. And sometimes kids want to talk.
Hold on, Julie. You blipped out on that last question. You blipped out for a second. Will you say it again?
Oh, now I can't even remember. So what are you most grateful for? Or what would you like to change? And sometimes even asking questions like, sometimes I'll say, just to break the ice if they're really kind of shut down, I'll say, okay, so who got in a food fight? And they're like, what? I'm like, did anything happen? And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I don't know, I just pulled something out of the air. And then they loosen up and they're like, Mom. And they're like, well, this happened at school. And so then they'll talk more. So sometimes it's just asking a completely random question out of the blue. And that works too. But I love the best and worst. That's a great dinner conversation starter too.
Mm-hmm. What about, so since we've talked about a lot of good questions to ask, what are the questions that totally shut kids down, like the wrong questions to ask?
Well, you said one of them earlier. How are you? How was your day? You're going to get it was fine. And then they're going to put their earbuds in, and they're going to listen to music, and you're getting nothing more. There's nothing engaging about that question. And we ask it all the time. So add some creativity in it, just like we were talking about. Saying questions like, well, why didn't you do this? Or why would you do that? Is tinged with guilt. And really any why question has guilt associated with it. So why wouldn't you do this? Why did you make that choice? I always change it to what. Like, well, what would happen if you did this? What would happen if, X, Y, Z? So I'll change that. Sometimes you still might get a little shut down with it, but it's not guilt ridden. Where Y definitely has this just has this air of guilt around it. And it does for adults, it does for kids, it does for anybody. The other thing is saying, oh, just get over it. This is not a problem. Just get over it. For your child, it's a problem. So or saying, why can't you just move on? Or this is just boys and girls. It's discounting their feelings. It's going to shut them down. And the first thing they're going to say is, well, my parents don't understand me. Why would I even talk to them in the first place? So those type of things don't, and if you say, why are you so sensitive? Again, it's the why questions. Or don't be so sensitive. Again, it's an attack on them where they're feeling like, well, I don't think I'm that sensitive. Or is this a bad thing? Don't be such a girl. Or why are you acting like such a girl? I get that a lot where girls will say, my dad said, why am I acting like such a girl? Is it a bad thing to be a girl? And so we have to talk about that. And it's a lot of education for parents. Remember what you're saying. There's a message behind everything you say, whether you realize it or not.
Are there some good techniques for communicating, like to make sure that you're acknowledging what you have heard them say before you move on, like taking a moment to acknowledge? I mean, I know I've been trained in nonviolent communication with Marshall Rosenberg, but even being trained in a technique is very different than being able to provide empathy when I'm feeling triggered myself.
Right. I think the first thing I recommend is if you are feeling triggered, if you're feeling anything, take a breath. You need to breathe. And it's that breath can even give you just a couple seconds of, okay, what do I need to say? And the more you do it, you're going to model that for your child. But as a parent, if you hear something, go, okay. And you could just say, okay, well, let's see. What do we need to do with this? And just make a statement like that and put it back on your child to say it. Because we can go through so many different techniques, but really in the heat of it, we're not going to remember all of it. So it's breathing, it's mirroring, it's reflecting. Okay, so let me just make sure I understand this. And sometimes I'll get very counselor-y with my kids, and I have to stop doing that, but I'll say, okay, humor me, because sometimes my brain doesn't work. And they're like, oh my God, you have holes in your brain again. I'm like, I do. I have holes in my brain, so let me make sure I understood what you're saying. And so it's making yourself seem human, but again, you're hearing what they said. You're having them restate it. Or, okay, this is what I heard, but I don't know. Maybe I didn't hear it correctly. You're giving yourself kind of that out, which you may have heard it perfectly fine, but again, it's their opportunity to get back in touch with it and tell you what's really going on, and for you to diffuse any feelings you have.
What about the question, will you tell me what you just heard me say? I sometimes feel I notice like shame come over me during sessions when I ask that question, because I feel like I'm being so adult there. But I also want to check in and make sure that we've communicated something. So what are your thoughts about that question?
I think it's a good question. I think that it does sound very adult, and it doesn't feel like there's shame addressed to it. But it is accountability, and so you can say, you know what, I just need to do a check-in. Can you just let me know where we're at, so I can make sure we're on the same page? Mm-hmm. Little things like that, because I love accountability, and kids need accountability. We need accountability. It's just finding a way to speak it in their language, because it is a very adult question. It's a great question because it's having them check in, and you want them to check in. It's just speaking it in a language that they recognize more.
Well, and sometimes I do say, like, I know I'm going to sound like such a grown-up right now, but I just have to ask, and I don't know how else to ask it. What'd you just hear me say? I want to make sure that I'm communicating to you.
See, and that's the whole thing. And this isn't about pretending we're something we're not, but it's about saying, you know what, this does sound really adult, and I'm going to ask it anyway. Or this is going to be a tough question. I'm going to ask it anyway. Or I just need to check in. I got to make sure that we're on the same page, because if you're not on the same page with me, or vice versa, this isn't going to work. So yeah, I love the idea of checking in, and it's just figuring out how to say it that works with your child.
I want to name for those listening, because I don't think that listening in the replay you're not going to see the chat, that Allison, who's with us, said that sometimes she'll ask her kids what boring things happened at school, and she gets more information when she asks that question.
Yeah, That's a great one. If they want to talk about boring stuff, they like to talk about kids, anything that's happened that was dramatic, that didn't involve them. They like to talk about who got in trouble at school. So anything like that, but boring, they'll be like, oh my God, it was so boring. I had to do this test, and then we had to do this, and you get so much information.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome, Allison. Let me see. Oh, yeah. The eye rolls and the sighs. How do we deal with that?
Yeah, well, they're actually pretty easy to deal with. It just takes a little bit of patience again. Eye rolls are doing two things. One, it's a little bit of an act of rebellion, and two, it's their way to kind of challenge power. However, they're both completely harmless. If they do it, you know what, I see adults that do it. We just don't realize it. The best thing to do is ignore it, and you're going to get, or often kids don't even realize they're doing it. So what I say is, you have two choices. You can fight it, which doesn't work because then again, you're butting heads, they've shut down, you're frustrated, you're not getting anywhere. So the second thing is, say what you have to say, like get in, get out. Say what you need to say, and before all those triggers can happen, okay, I've done what I need to do and move on. So that way, again, you're not dealing with it. And you're kind of ignoring that that's there. And then the third one is, you can sometimes make a joke out of it and acknowledge that it's there, but it takes that emotional charge out of it. So let's say they're going, you could say, ooh, that was good. Next time, can you cross your eyes when you do it? And then after a while, they're going to be like, okay, Mom's just going to make fun of me. Or, Mom, we might do it just for jokes. But again, it diffuses the situation, but it's not going to change. And that's why I always tell families, I said, you're still going to have eye rolls. You're still going to have sighs. You may have them the rest of your life in certain things. I know I still roll my eyes when my mother, who's 76, says stuff. She might say something, and there's part of me, I'm going, did she really just say that? So we're still going to do it, but I don't feel any hate towards her, or there's no point, but like misused intentions. There's nothing behind it except for really it's just me kind of expressing whatever it was I needed to say. So there's still.
I have a client who really rolls his eyes a lot. Mm-hmm. And at the very beginning, this was so hard for me. And I just want to name what it feels like inside my body. I don't know if anybody else is like this, but I just feel stabbed in the gut. I mean, it feels so bad mm-hmm. to have someone out there giving me that kind of
the feedback.
Nonverbal feedback. Yeah. And I noticed that what I need to do before sessions with him, and granted, I'm in the luxury of controlling when I see people who trigger me like this. And so I just make sure that I do some really extra self-care and have a good laugh or have something that's fun right before his session so that I'm more grounded and playful. Mm-hmm. I know that's harder for parents, but anyway, that's what I've noticed.
Well, and I think that's a good point because often this is about them when they're making those gestures or those nonverbal cues are coming out than it is you. But it's also completely appropriate to say, hey, you know what, sometimes I notice you roll your eyes when I'm talking, and you may not even realize it, but I feel. So use an I statement, not you're making me feel. I feel like you're not listening, or I feel this. And they can be like, oh, I'm listening. And say, okay, I just want you to know that that's something that I'm experiencing, or that you may not even know that you're doing it. You can do that as well. I don't always like to do that at that moment unless it's a pretty mellow moment and they're kind of just having a general conversation. It happens. If it's an emotionally charged one, bringing that up is just more fuel to the fire.
What's the difference between naming your feelings like that and guilt tripping your kids?
Well, I think if you're naming your feelings like that, it's I feel. So I feel this. I feel it's not you. If you're doing you, it's shaming, it's blaming, you're putting it all on them. If you're taking ownership, I feel like this when this happens, or I feel like this when you roll your eyes, you're still saying, you could be rolling your eyes at anybody. This is how I feel, though. So it's not blaming them. And they might say, well, you're blaming me. I'm not blaming you. This is just how I feel. I need to own my feelings. So I just wanted you to know so you're aware of it. That's it.
And it sounds like it's naming my feelings in this moment. It's not like You always respond, you always roll your eyes, It's like,
Oh,
in this moment, I'm feeling triggered, or you wouldn't say triggered to a kid, but anyway.
I might to mine, but that's totally different. But that's because this is their rule. But yes, yeah, exactly. And I think anytime you use always or never, like, and we say it like, and we do that, we're like, you always do this. That's going to trigger it. So that's blaming, shaming, it's guilting. You should do this. You know, why haven't you done this? Those type of things bring on those feelings of guilt. So again, it's taking that step back and it's the I am and really owning it, what you're feeling. And even
Great.
you can say I need too. Again, I feel like this. I would like it if you didn't roll your eyes at me. Is there a way we could work that out? So those type of things too.
Great. And again, from those of you watching, I would love to hear your experiences with eye rolling. For those of you who are who have the tween kids now, I'd love to hear when you started noticing it happening more and more, because I'm just curious about sort of developmentally around what age. And for those of you who are parents of older kids, I'm just curious to hear what your experiences were. Do you sometimes feel as triggered as I felt? How did you handle it? Anyway, any comments like that in the chat would be lovely. But for us now, I think it's time for us to move into the big questions. I'm noticing the time, and I want to get to, we have at least 3 questions that were emailed in advance. And so I know the big questions we could spend a whole 3-hour or more seminar on. But what's your short version of how to handle sex, drugs, etc., Julie?
Well, I actually went to the team of kids that I work with, because I do go back to kids and ask their questions. And I said, what works best for you? And they're like, well, the last thing we want to do is our parents say, it's time to have a big talk. So don't approach it like that. Tie it into pop culture. Sit down with your kid, watch something on TV. You know, show the Pretty Little Liars. Watch Pretty Little Liars. And say, oh, wow, I noticed there's a lot of sex going on in here. What do you think about that? Opens the door right there, have the conversation. Or, wow, there seems to be a lot of alcohol at this party. What do you think about it? Do you ever notice those type of things? That's the best way. Tie it into pop culture, whether it's magazines, video games, television shows, movies. That's their language. That's what they know. It takes the pressure off them, and they might be talking about a character, but if they're going to tell you their feelings, you're going to figure out what it is they're saying. So that's kind of the short answer for approaching those. And also, do them when it's not reaction to something. Don't have a big talk if you've just caught your child drinking. Not going to work. You've got to do it either before or after when it's a little diffused.
So, and I noticed in your answer right there, it started with a number of questions, and I think that's fabulous, because that, again, it's the point about being curious and getting to know who your child is now, not who they were a few years ago or who you want them to be. But when in that process, can you or do you name your family's values around these topics? And sort of, I mean, because we don't really want to be lecturing, but we have a point of view as parents too about this.
Well, so one of the things, and it's a completely another topic, is a family meeting. And I'm an advocate of family meetings, and they don't have to be run. I should do a thing on the anti-boring approach to family meetings. We should do that.
Good, let's do that. Seriously, I love it.
Because they don't have to be boring. It sounds boring. It's not boring. During those times, these are moments where you can start identifying your family values, individual values. Start kind of talking about that. What is, does your family really value service? Then you can talk about schedules and different things like that. So that is something I do advocate. And we didn't put that in here because, seriously, I could talk 2 hours on that alone. But I do think that that's something that has to be addressed, is, the values. And you can talk about them, as you're asking the questions. Well, here's something I value, or remember, we set some family values. How do you think this ties into that? And get their perspective.
Great, great. Okay, when we're done with this, we're gonna get on that anti-boring approach to family meetings, because the number one thing I want parents to do as an academic coach is to have a family meeting once a week where everyone in the family gets out their calendar and they share schedules with each other and they write it down, but have it not be about the kid. It's about everyone. Mom needs to let dad or other mom know that this is something that's happening this week, and just to model that. And I've never had a family take me up on it, but I've said it to everyone.
I love it. I love it. I will say, we do our best to do it. It doesn't always happen, but we do our best to do it here, and it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, great. Um, I have one more question to ask Julie before I'm going to move into the questions that were sent to me ahead of time. So this is a great time if another question has popped up for those of you listening that you want to put in the chat. Please feel free to do it. And so timing, I think you've actually hit on this, but just to make sure that we're being clear, when is the best time to talk to your teen or tween?
Well, again, I went back to the kids that I work with and asked them, and because I already had my own idea of what works with my family, but resoundingly said, do not talk to me when I first wake up. I'm tired and I'm groggy and I'm hungry and I just want to be left alone. Do not talk to me when I first come back from school. I just did school. The last thing I want to hear is another adult. I just don't want to hear anybody's voice. Don't talk to me when I'm going out with my friends. You can say, make good choices, but don't give me a lecture. I don't want to hear it. So those are the three terrible times to do it. But most of the kids said, I love it when we talk at mealtime. And we talk about how was your day? We talk about a certain topic. Mom brought a headline, and we all talked about the headline, today's headline. Or we brought an article, or we each had to bring something that week of a topic we wanted to discuss. That was a great time. Before bed, and they're like, the best time I talk to my parent is right before they're falling asleep, because I know they're not going to question me. I can say anything, and they're drowsy and tired, and it's not going to be an argument because they're going to fall asleep soon. So time it around then. Look at bedtime. Invite them in, and if you're tired, be tired, but they will open up those moments.
Nice. I love that, actually. And I unfortunately see most of my clients right after school, so it's the wrong time, but they're at least used to it.
Well, and like I said, it can be different because you're playful and it's part of their school day, but with their parents are like, oh my God, that's just my mom talking. It sounds like the Peanuts, wah, 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 with Lucy and everybody in the class. That's what it's like.
Yeah. A lot of my clients, I now have a program where I can schedule text messages to come to them. And it's one of my favorite conversations at the end of a session to say, like, what kind of either reminders or questions do you need through the week, and exactly when should they show up to help you or to encourage you to respond. And it's a fascinating, I'm not exactly suggesting this for parents, I guess I'm just noting that it's fun for me to have the conversation to help kids become more conscious about when is the right time and when is the wrong time for me in the way that I interact with the world.
Absolutely. I mean, if you can ask your child, ask them. Like, this is the whole thing. Ask them, when can I talk to you? What's a good time? And see what they say. But in general, those are the other times that work.
Yeah. Great. Well, I'm ready to move into people's questions, but before I do that, will you let folks know how they can connect with you further if they would like to?
So there's two things that we can do. I'm going to do my best to answer whatever questions come in. I may have to, for the sake of time, be a little brief in my responses. So if there's additional questions, I'm happy to make myself available. People can connect with me on Facebook, or they can just email me directly at hello@juliesmith.com. And then I also have 2 freebies that I prepared for you, and one is the 10 things your tween wants you to know right now, and another one called Connect with Tweens. And so those are available at juliesmith.com/anti-boring, no hyphen, all one word.
And I think Megan is going to give you guys a direct link to that in the next minute or so, but I'm going to also write it into the chat so we have that. So juliesmith.com /anti-boring. And anti-boring with a hyphen?
No hyphen, all one word.
Hyphen. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm just going to read these questions that were emailed to me. The first one is, how can I talk to my kid about school and encourage good practices without seeming to nag? We discussed the nagging issue a little bit already, but she goes on to say, simple reminders seem to come off negatively and make things worse. How can I get him to open up about other things in life also?
So I'm going to address the last part of the question first. To get him to open up, really, you've got to go back to some of those do's and don'ts, but learn his language. If he likes texting. Sometimes it may be texting him something. Hey, um, don't want to nag. I just want to make sure that you've done some chores. Those type of things, or that this is done. Play video games, watch sports. You'll learn his language. So that's really important. This goes back to getting to know your child, because what we think is a simple question, it may not be a simple question in their language at this time. So it's getting to know him. Also, it's taking that step back and allowing him to figure some of these things out. So the example that I can give you is, and I'm going to tie this into schoolwork because this is the anti-boring approach to homework, or to studying. So there's a 13-year-old who is struggling with homework, failing classes, not doing well, reminders of, did you do your homework, are not being met. Eyes rolling, yeah, I did it, I'm going to do it, that type of thing. So rather than constantly say the reminders, once a week, say, okay, we're gonna set up goals. I'm gonna have some goals, you're gonna have some goals. Let's do 1 to 2 goals around school. So it could be complete all the missing assignments, do study 30 minutes, pass a test, and then set a consequence. So if you don't meet these goals, here's, you won't be able to go to this party, or is there something else? And they might say, no, that's all I have going on. Then you don't get to go to the party on Friday, or you don't get to text over the weekend. You don't get your phone. And then you don't say anything else. You check in maybe once on Wednesday, or on Thursday. That's it. So in this case, I would say on Wednesday, say, wow, who's got weekend plans? And if your son says, oh, I do, I'm going to go to that party, say, oh, that's great. You must really be working towards your goals. Period. Thursday, it's a family meeting or whatever it is. How's everybody doing on their goals? If it's not done, there's 1 day to finish it. If it's not done, Friday, there's a consequence. What this does is help them have problem solving, and it has them own the consequence and the behavior. It will work. It takes a while, but it takes the micromanaging out of you. So you don't have to always be telling them the simple reminders. Shouldn't have to do that. As a parent, there's a time when you've got to step back and have them do it, because otherwise it enables them to not make choices and not to be responsible.
From my perspective, I wonder if an additional question that a parent could ask during that first conversation is, great, so you're going to, the plan sounds like da-da-da-da, whatever you decided. Are there any check-ins or reminders you need or want from me?
Yep, and I think that's great too. And I've had parents say, well, my son wrote a goal of wake up. Okay, accept that as the goal, because what's going to happen, there will be natural consequences in the other parts. If he's not doing homework, then he is going to fail. And maybe you've set an expectation when you had a family meeting and you worked on that of, you know what, if you're failing a class, we have to intervene. Or if we're going to give you some leeway. I always tell my kids, I'm going to give you leeway. But if there's a consistent pattern of something, I'm going to have to step in. And I have to step in and go to the school and this and that. And they don't want me to do that. They want to figure it out. So if you've established that beforehand, then like you said, ask them what they need and then let them figure it out.
Great. I'm sure there's so much more to this. I know we're galloping through. In the chat, Allison asked if eye rolling in boys starts later than in girls, because she's noticed in her 16-year-old that he's just started to do it.
Yeah, I do see that. I think you get more eye rolls from girls, just in general. And often I see it started 3rd grade with girls. They're rolling their eyes at what mom says, what the teacher says. And with boys, I think you get it more later in life. And it depends on your child. But yeah, I typically see things like that and certain behaviors happening later with boys.
My cousin who I'm staying with right now has a 2-year-old, and he was in the bathtub last night, and she asked him a question, and he just sort of did the talk to the hand thing, and I don't think he knows talk to the hand, but it's like, oh my God, it starts early. I wanted to page down. Taryn is asking, what's the best way to deal with defiance? So I'm assuming this is just like outright, you're talking, they're being defiant.
They're being defiant. So what I see with defiance is instantly it's a charge. It triggers you, and you're like, oh my God, they're doing this, they're doing that. And so in that moment, you have to step away. You can talk calmly. If you could say, all right, here's what I need again. Here's what I need you to do. And if they're just being defiant, say, obviously this is not working right now. So I'm going to step away, or you can step away, and we will come back and revisit it. So what would you like to do? Would you like to step away and come back at this time, or would you like me to step away and we come back at this time? And so that's the choice you've given them. Then they come back. You may still get some of the eye rolls. It's not going to happen overnight. You're going to get little defiance, but if you can get them to sit down and talk to them, then you're making some progress. There's so much more you can do. I mean, with defiance, it depends on the level. Sometimes it's just them acting out. It could be tied to what happened at school. You know, are they taking it out on you because somebody, you know, a girl broke up with them, or whatever else happened at school, or a teacher humiliated them, and so now they're being defiant with you. So again, it's asking questions. Rather than being triggered, ask questions. And if you have to step away and ask the questions when he's calm, because he will calm down. And again, if you need to come together over a TV show or go out for ice cream or something, that doesn't mean you're rewarding the behavior. It means you're providing an opportunity to talk. If you say, well, just fine, go do this, and you're leaving me alone to play the video games, that can be seen as a reward. But if you're saying, hey, why don't, you know what, it was really charged. Let's spend a little bit of time. You know, I know you love this game. Let's do this, or let's watch this show. Calms him down, and then you can say, you know, what's going on? Because I noticed that you really seemed agitated and frustrated. Is it me, or is there something else?
So I'm hearing a couple of things, like just, again, taking the space, acknowledging what's going on, taking some space if space is needed. But I really love the idea of doing something together if you can. Like, they might be too defiant to want to spend time with you, in which case space is important. But letting them know that you're going to come back and re-engage again later, and providing some sort of choice there. But then also trying to do something side by side if possible, so that you have a more, it takes away the charge, it creates more of a sense of play, it probably calms you down too.
And side by side more than face to face. And you just said it, because side by side there's no pressure. Face to face, it feels confrontational.
Great, I love that. Great. So one of the other questions that was emailed in before is, I would love to get Julie's take on activities and scheduling. How do we know when it becomes too much and a break is needed? My daughter loves her sports, student council, and other clubs, but just never is sure when enough is enough. Right. And how do we communicate that she can't do it all?
So there's a couple things here. Is it too much for the parent or too much for the child? And so that's a very important question. And I always say you've got to look at what's going on, because kids have full schedules, and sometimes they do fantastic with it. It's the parents that's saying, this is one more thing. I can't do this. I can't do that. So you have to really look at it. Sadly, overscheduling runs rampant, because kids are often required now to have a job, and even tweens to have a job, whether it's babysitting or lawn care or something like that. They have a job, they're on a sports team, they have top grades, they need to be involved with civic organizations, extracurricular organizations, they want to see their friends, they have to be part of a family. Oh, and they have to sleep and go to school and do all of this. It makes my mind spin, because I cannot do that much. So I'm one of these people, I always tell my kids, I know you want to do this, I can't do this. So you can figure out a way for you to do this that works for both of us. But yeah, I would ask, the first question is the overscheduling either the parent or the child? And then if it's the child, look for ways. Or if it's the parent, look for ways. If it's just too much, can they carpool? Can they do different things? If the child is feeling stressed and overwhelmed, sleep's being affected, not eating, diminished quality of life, you got to step in. And so what I always say is start out by helping your child figure out what they're getting from every activity. Is it socialization? Is it school grades? Is it a sense of belonging? Is it just they love art so much it feeds their creativity? Or is it a requirement, a grade, anything? So do that. Go through. And again, don't let them say, well, I should be taking this class, because that's guilt. They don't want to do it. If they're saying they should do it, they really don't want to do it. They just think they have to. And then I would say get a calendar and you're going to love this one, and I knew you would love this after what you said. Get a calendar and start looking at the time. Block out sleeping. Block out anything that you have to do. You know, maybe you have certain family engagements. Block all of that out. Block out school time, homework time. Then have her identify things she needs that nurture her soul. Maybe she loves to read. What does she need to recharge? Is it bath time? These are now non-negotiable items. They go in there next. Then she can start putting in the list of activities and prioritize them. And it gives her the choice to say, oh, I don't have enough time for all 5 activities if I do all these things that I have to do. And so she's got to start doing it. So again, it's putting it back on her. Don't solve it for her. Give her the opportunity to help. If she's still putting so much in, well, this and that, then you can say, let's start with 2. Let's start with 2, and we can work towards 3 once we see that we can have it. So it was a very long answer. I love the calendar approach because, again, it puts it back on the child. And the most important thing with everything we're talking about is teach your child resiliency and problem solving. That's what kids need at this age. They're going to need that today. They need it tomorrow. They're going to need it when they go to college and beyond.
Yeah, that's so great. And I have seen so many kids, I mean, often what I do is have them do exactly what you said in terms of blocking out their schedule. And one thing I would add to your answer is also requiring that there be some, as they build that in, some chill out time, that they don't go directly from one activity to another, but that they are planning some deliberate downtime that's not for homework, that's not for their activity.
That's those activities where reading, bath time, and as a parent you can say, oh, well, we need to factor in travel time. So this is not just an hour activity, it's an hour drive. Block that out as well. And like I said, chill out time. I think you have to have that. Just lay in your bed and put the earbuds on, anything to recharge. And that's more important than the activities in my mind. That gets put in right there at the top.
Yeah. We're wrapping up our hour right now, and there's one more question on the chat I wanted to ask, and we might actually stay on a little bit longer just so that the recording, because I also want to ask a question that feels super important around bullying in just a moment. But if there are any last-minute questions for those of you who are listening in, please feel free to add them to the chat. And the last one here is the person who asked earlier about how to not nag. Mm-hmm. She then followed up by saying that she was specifically interested in terms of, I think it was daily reminders about homework and studying. Like I'm assuming she means things like it's time to do your homework now. Have you done your homework yet? That sort of thing.
Oh, do you want me to readdress that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I think you answered very beautifully in terms of sort of big goal setting and planning, so that I think the next follow-up is, but what about the daily, like have you done your homework yet, kind of a question.
Again, I think it goes right back to scheduling it, and once a week, say, here's what needs to be done. And I like the team approach of saying, we're a team. I can't run this family. This is not a family without all of us. Here's what we all need to get done this week. So who wants to do this? And allowing them to schedule it. If this doesn't happen, what's the consequence?
Okay, so then in that meeting, you might say that I as the parent, there might be an agreement. I'm going to check in with you once a day at 8 p.m. or whatever, and what's going to be the consequence if you haven't finished your homework by then?
Exactly. And you know, I actually say less than that, because the consequence of not doing the homework, it's going to have a natural consequence by having a missing assignment at school. Because the more you're reminding, the more you're taking away their ability to do this on their own. So I would say every other day at the most, because the more we remind, the more it sounds like nagging, and the more we're giving them the opportunity not to do it. We've got to teach a sense of responsibility. They have to learn how to do this. When they're in grade school, there's always some leeway, but as soon as they're in middle school, nobody's holding their hand. They have to do this, and they've got to figure out how they can do it. And sometimes it's the natural consequences. It's letting them fall or fail so they can realize, oh my God, this is bad. I need to fix this.
I'm hearing voices right now in people's heads going, but what about college? I mean, I know that really that's what you just said, Julie, is the best way, but there's so much pressure around college these days, and if I can help them with a reminder to get this one more grade that's going to help them look better on college applications.
Well, I would say if you're looking ahead to college, do you want a child who goes to college and is able to do it? Do you want to keep reminding them when they're in college? Do you want to send them a note and say, did you do your homework today? You don't. So once you're consistent, and the biggest mistake I see parents make is that we're not consistent. And I'm guilty of this too. If we just are consistent with these practices, the problems self-correct on their own, and kids get it. There are occasions where you need some more intense help, and you have to seek that. There's red flags, and we're not going into any of that. But if you're consistent with these, and you continually put it back on your child, ask them the questions, give them the accountability, and just say, hey, I'm going to check in with you a couple times a week. Are there certain days? Do you want me to check in with you by text? Just like you said, or by phone, or during a meal? What works for you? For me, with my kids, like with my son, he texts. He's like, well, just text me. And so I will be sitting upstairs, and I'll say, hey, I'm just checking in. Did you do the laundry? He's like, oh, thanks for the reminder. That's it. And he knows I'm going to do that probably twice a week. That's it.
Great. I love that. Actually, that really helps me because I often don't know what to suggest to parents, and so I love the idea of twice a week. I think that's great. And Allison just said that you answered her question, so that's wonderful.
Yay!
Yay! So feel free to log off whenever you need to, folks, but I wanted to just take 5 more minutes to address another question that was emailed in about a daughter who gets bullied a lot at school, partially because she herself feels like she needs to control a lot of things. And she's also just one of these really different kids. She just doesn't fit in. And the specific situation was yesterday at camp. I think she's going into 7th grade, but she likes eating kind of the more hippie kind of food, and she had something that the kids thought was weird that included a packet of peanut sauce, and when she opened the peanut sauce, it plopped out and looked super gross. I'm sure it looked like poop or something, and all the kids were like, you're so gross. And this was just one extra example of this kid feeling, if not quite bullied, then really pushed aside and not fitting in, and then she tries harder to fit in, and it just doesn't work, and it's so painful for the parents to watch. And I know we only have a few minutes, but what thoughts do you have about a situation like that?
And that's such a tough situation, and it happens every day. And as adults, we can easily say, oh, well, that's great they don't fit in. They should be an individual. They're wonderful. They're creative. You know, the Dr. Seuss quote comes to mind, why fit in when you were born to stand out? For adolescents, for tweens to teens, that does not mean anything. More than any other time in their life, this is a moment of fitting in. They want to fit in. Because fitting in means acceptance, it means a sense of belonging, it means you have your place. So whether it's what you eat for lunch, what you dress, the haircuts, you'll start to see, it's almost that, I always call it the herd mentality, but you start seeing everybody looks alike, they all wearing the same thing. And when that's not enough, it can feel, it's devastating, and for kids. And so as a parent, there's a couple things that you can do. I do think reinforcing the message of you are wonderful and you are that. But kids also look and they say, okay, that's my mom. Of course she's going to think I'm wonderful. She's going to think I'm wonderful if I'm green and purple. It's practicing family gratitude, which I like because I do think that gives kids a sense of grounding. It's also teaching her to, rather than just be grateful, appreciate. I appreciate this about myself. She can journal about that, those type of things. So those are little exercises. I wrote down, I was actually working on a bowling thing not too long ago, and I wrote down a statistic, and I want to grab it because it just happens to be in the pile next to me, that the Boys and Girls Club did a study in 2006, and that the tweens said that what they want more than anybody are actual strategies to help with peer pressure or with bullying, because they don't want to go to say, oh, this is happening, and tattletale, because that doesn't help. They want actual strategies. And so it's going to go back and question role play. Uh, what is there something she's missing? If she's getting really controlling in a situation, that typically can happen if another area in her life is feeling out of control. And it sounds like that friendship piece is feeling like it's out of control. It's missing. So she overcompensates by being really controlling in other situations. So I think the first step is define what a friend is. What is a friend for her? How does she want to treat somebody? How does she want to be treated? And then start looking. Are the friends she's around right now, are they just friends because they've been around each other their whole life? Or is it time for this situation to evolve? Maybe they won't be friends at school. And you always hate that. And you say, well, you might not have friends at school. But you're not saying that. You're finding where those friends are. We all need a tribe. Where are her people? Where is she going to find them? Is she going to camps just because this is mom's agenda? Or is she going to it because this is what she loves? If there's kids that want to go to music camp, but mom's got them in an acting camp, they may not connect with those people. The bullying thing I can go into in such detail, and I know we're running out of time. I would be happy to write some points, and maybe what I'll do is I'll add something on that page. I'll see if I can write something up with some specific strategies when there is, whether it's just unkind behavior or bullying. And again, I also think it's, well, what have you done to make this happen? Don't use questions like that. You can say, since it's really tough to find those people, or it's really tough. Have you tried this? Have you tried that? So, and this isn't shaming. This is, again, helping them problem solve, role play certain situations. You know, if you're eating something and the peanut butter squirts out and it looks like poop, you could be like, oh my God, that totally does look gross, but I gotta say, it's tasty. You know, it's little, and have her practice, because you don't think of that. Or, oh yeah, and you know, I've had this. There's a girl who she's scared that she's gonna get hit whenever she goes. She's like, I'm so afraid. I'm afraid she's gonna say mean things to me, or what if they hit me? I'm like, well, there's a lot of what ifs. I said, but what happens if you just say, oh, okay. She's like, well, she's gonna call me names, and you could say, oh, okay. You don't have to believe that, and you can have the people that support you, but you're taking away all that energy. Eventually, it stops. But it's, as a parent, it's heartbreaking, and I do think often it hurts us more when we see them struggling, because we don't know what to do, and we don't know what to say, and we don't know how to help them because they have to do this on their own.
Yeah. Yeah. That's maybe a fitting ending. They just have to do it on their own, and we want to help so much.
And I say that it's not leaving them high and dry, but we've got to give problem-solving skills to help them work through this. And this sounds like one where sometimes, I mean, it happens at every lunchroom that happens, but when you're not fitting in and there is some things that you're like, I just don't know what to do, it can lead to really feeling left out. And so I'm happy to put some things together offline that goes a little more deeper into this.
Great. Well, this has been so delightful, Julie. Oh my goodness. And
you're so much fun.
I'm actually hoping that when you're mentioning the anti-boring approach to family meetings made me realize that I don't think I've told you yet, and I certainly haven't told our listeners, that one of the things I'm planning is a series kind of like the anti-boring approach to powerful studying, but for the semester. And I'll also hopefully have some guest experts in to walk people through different stages of the semester. And I think it would be fabulous for you and I to, and I'm going to call this series the Best School Year Ever series. And I think it would be fabulous to have a little something at maybe in August or early September to launch this, where we talk about how to do a family meeting, because that would help me so much in my own coaching, and I know families are curious about it. So
I agree. I would love to. That would be great.
And we could revisit the bullying issue too later in the semester. That might be an October or November thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much for listening in, everyone. And for those who are on the replay and want to access Julie's freebie offerings for those of us who are in the anti-boring program. It is, again, juliesmith.com/anti-boring, one word. So email me if you don't find that somehow, and I am gretchen.wegner@gmail.com. So thanks, everyone. And Julie, once I stop the broadcast, we'll check in for just a little bit on the other side. So, all right. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.